So what does the mix look like between products and services for the kids? It's really up to them.
Yeah.
It's whatever they are interested and passionate about. I try not to get in the way of
Absolutely.
that. If I try to, put them into a box, they get bored easy.
Yep.
As an entrepreneur, it has to be something that they're completely passionate about or excited about or are going to want to just hustle on for a year straight. And even with that, as they enjoy what they're doing and they pick up something, that they're still kids. They get distracted or they see something shinier and they, what have you. So if they want to pursue a service or a product or a nonprofit, awesome. Honestly, that's not my primary concern. My primary concern is the outcomes of the entrepreneurial mindset and all the other things that sort of go along for the ride. That starting a business is the medium that brings along all those other little character traits that we're dropping.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of the vehicle for a variety of expressions. Could be creativity, could be design, could be engineering, could be, the non-profit side, helping people in need.
Sure.
So how'd you get into this, Kurt?
The Incubator EDU program. So 6 years ago, our superintendent Aaron Sadoff, who's sort of a rock star, went to a conference down in Texas or something like that, and there was Incubator EDU is part of a national program. So there's a couple hundred schools around the U.S. and the world that are running it in their schools. And he went to a conference, and it was just getting started then. There's probably like 10 schools in the U.S. that are running it, and he was talking to the folks, and he got excited, as he always does. He's a huge, awesome cheerleader that way. And he came back to me and says, "Hey, we got to do this." I'm like, okay, whatever. And I've got some entrepreneurial experience. I've started 3 businesses, almost fourth of 4, but that didn't happen, which is good experience as well.
Sure.
And I'm thinking to myself, nope, we're not going to, no, I can do this on my own. And, but he's like, just give it a little. I'm like, okay, cool. So every year they have a summit in Chicago for 3 or 4 days where all the Incubator EDU teachers from around the U.S. and world get together and hang out and just go to conferences and learn and connect and network. And at that first day at that training, I was learning more and more about their curriculum and how the process works and what they're doing and the lean startup methods. And the people that were involved on the back end building that curriculum are some really heavy hitters. And for example, one of the folks that was working there and helping in the initial process, like, yeah, we just sold our company to Google for $230 million. And I was a little bored now, so I think we're going to do this. I'm like, okay, cool. We don't have those numbers in schools. So playing around in that a little bit more, and then at that night I called Aaron in the hotel room. Like, we're all in. Like, we're going to start it next year. Change the course title, go. So I'm all about just jumping into the deep end right away, and let's just roll with it. So that next fall in September, kids showed up to my marketing class and said, "Hey guys, congratulations! You're not in marketing anymore. We're an Incubator EDU. Let's roll." And we sort of built it as we have the saying of build the airplane as it's flying. So we lived that mindset for the first couple of years, and it just has grown. And from there, then we started connecting with awesome people in the community, with Envision Greater Fond du Lac and a lot of other awesome businesses, and we just started asking questions, and the support came.
No,
so 5 years later, here we are.
5 years. So it was 2017-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Sounds about right.
So what type of kids are drawn to this program? So you said it shifted from kind of a marketing class to entrepreneurship. Was it the same types of people that were drawn to marketing were also drawn to this, or did it bring in a lot of new, fresh ideas and fresh people?
Both.
Yeah.
So obviously, I'm going to get the kids there to are inclined and excited about marketing a business as their future. But I also headhunt for the class. So every year I'll grab all the freshman, sophomore, and junior kids lists of the rosters. And I'll go through and I'll mark it up, and I'll talk with some other teachers about who would be good for it and things like that. So we'll headhunted kids, and then obviously we'll get a lot of other kids as well that are going to join in. Some kids are really excited, want to do this as a profession. We've got some diehard entrepreneurs that I know are going to kill it in the adult world when they get out of school. And others are like, yep, cool experience. I don't want to do this ever again. And both are good because, again, I'm concerned about the mindset, not the output
Absolutely.
of running the business. And if they do start a business, that's the cherry on top. So the type of kids that I get in there are the all over the spectrum. So I've got the heavy go-getters, the outgoing kids, the 4.0s, and then I've also got the kids that are C and D students that are sort of like trying to find their way. And the results are very mixed. So sometimes I get the 4.0 students that just completely rock it in the class and they're awesome and they just take the ball and run with it, and that's a lot of fun. And sometimes I get the 4.0 kids that are like, there's no right or wrong like there's no right answers in this class. And I said, you're right, there isn't. There's just better answers. And sometimes those kids have really hard time living in that thing.
The ambiguity in
this is the first time I've ever gotten a B. I'm like, okay, well, do better. Right. So let's work through that a little bit because they're just, it's an unclassroom. And then on the flip side, the kids that may not thrive really well in some of the other classes, which I fell into as a kid.
Same here.
I'm a hands-on technical school sort of a guy. I did not like, your traditional classes, but I thrived in those hands-on marketing businesses stuff where I could apply those concepts and things. Some of those kids shine because it's like something goes and they're just excited and they roll. So it serves a lot of different types of kids, which is exciting to see.
So you talked earlier about passion and not trying to direct somebody towards a certain project or a certain business idea. How much of some of the challenges that kids have with traditional schooling is just the fact that nothing has sparked their passion, and suddenly a program like this comes along where they can spend their time and their energy on something they want, and like you said, the C and the D students or people that maybe don't thrive in a traditional context, suddenly it unlocks this whole new passion for them.
That's super cool to see when those kids, when you see that light bulb go on with those kids and they all of a sudden have a connection and they have something they get excited about coming to school for the day. That's great. And I've heard that from kids in the past. Like
I can totally see that.
I really did, like, I'm not excited about coming to school today. I show up to school every day because of this class. Yeah. Awesome. And it doesn't work for everybody. But it works for a lot of the kids. And that's fantastic to see. And it's really exciting. The overall, you're serving a lot of kids. It works out really, really nicely, and some of them it just doesn't connect. But what I really enjoy seeing is at the end of the year, because we push these kids hard and we put them in uncomfortable situations and such, that at the beginning of the year, the confidence isn't there, the attention to detail, the mindset and stuff. And at the end of the year, they're doing all this stuff, and I'm like, look at where you are and where you've come from and how awesome you are. And I get a lot of kids who are like, business wasn't for me, but I feel more confident. I can get up in front of a group of people. I can pitch things. I can work with a whole bunch of different types of personality traits. And I'm like, there it is.
So do you guys kind of take a full spectrum business approach where you're touching on some product, some design, marketing and sales? Do you get into accounting? Do you get into the finance side of it, or what? How do you kind of weight those different business functions?
So all those business functions are baked into the process. So we use a lean startup process. And everything is 100% by doing. So there's no direct, okay, folks, we're going to sit down and talk about the assets and liabilities and owner's equity and all these other things. Some of those kids have had those classes prior to.
Sure.
Some of those kids will get those classes afterwards now that the spark is lit. But all that content is built in by doing, right? So instead of just talking about it abstractly, nope, we're going to have this coach come in, a community member that's going to guide us through this process. And by the end of the hour, you'll get it, or you'll learn enough to at least ask the right questions, and then we go. So it's complete hands-on all day long.
Yeah, I remember hearing Elon Musk talk about the school that he started for his kids, and he was just mentioning how traditionally in schools, a component of it is memorizing the toolbox. So you learn the tools rather than diving into a project and then realizing you need a tool and then you go to look for it. And it sounds like that's kind of what you're doing, is start to encounter problems, and then once you encounter problems, there's support on the back end. Don't spend all the time memorizing the toolbox. You might not even need every single tool.
Yeah, a couple things on that. So one, we don't do tests in the class. I'm not a big test guy. I'd rather them show me what they know and build it and present it and do it, rather than just regurgitate and forget it. But the whole concept of the course and what we do is built around problem solving. So we identify a problem, we go out and research whether or not that there's other people that have that same problem, or is it just our problem, And if that's a marketable problem, then we start looking for, all right, so what potential solutions are out there and such. That not only applies to the products and services that they're building, but also how they get through in a day-by-day process. I try to take a hands-off approach on a lot of this stuff with the kids because I want them to solve their own problems. They are very dependent, enabled in some cases, or just like, give me the right answer, tell me now. Nope. So we'll drop a lot of breadcrumbs in front of them and then just get out of the way. And sometimes it takes 5 minutes for the kids to pick it up and run with it, and others, weeks, and that's fine too. But building that ability for them to just solve their own problems, work through that, be less dependent on, and being able to just work through that problem-solving process is part of those non-technical skills that we build in.
Do you think that kids on average are more dependent now in terms of needing the exact outline and the exact path relative to, say when you were in high school or other generations that you've taught over the years, or is it they've never really been forced to, not forced, they've never been inspired to operate in a different way, or how has that changed over time?
Yeah, it's changed in a lot of different varieties. I don't know. In some cases, it might be exactly the same, in others different. Like you could argue, how has the internet changed?
Yeah.
When I started teaching, the internet Google was just a thing, right? And then with the advent of cell phones and their ability to get instant gratification and find the information that they need right away, their patience and their tolerance for time of how long it takes to get things done is way slower. It's way, like, they don't have that patience to do that anymore. That's different.
Yes.
Problem solving is no different than you or I or anyone else, right? It's just a matter of getting them an experience and having them to do that. It's, throwing them in the deep end and having those opportunities for them to try different things out and learn what that looks like and feels like. In many cases, they just haven't had that ability. Throw COVID into the mix, where they've been home for 2 years, and then there's some other social emotional sort of dependency issues, and for 2 years, a lot of these kids all through middle school that we've got now were at home by themselves, or that was a completely different, and that's part of the middle school process, as awkward as it is all about just learning how to be a good human. And then they get to high school, and it's been a learning curve the last year or two for that, but we'll get through it.
Sure. And you'd mentioned that you had a few businesses. What markets or what industries were those in?
So I started out when I graduated high school as a marketing business educator, and then shortly thereafter I entered the field of custom home building, and did that for 10 years on top of teaching. We started a renewable energy and solar and insulation division, and then I decided I left education for a little bit to pursue that full time, and decided that as soon as I left, I'm like, nope, I really miss kids. So went back in education, and then started another business with some fellow business teachers on educational technology consulting. So when Chromebooks were becoming a new thing and the Google Apps for education and stuff were a new thing, we were the ones that went into all the other districts and showed them how to best implement that. So,
no, that sounds like a pretty diverse background: home building to solar to teaching. I can see how you're able to interface with a lot of different types of students.
Well, the beauty of having those experiences under my belt were that when we're talking about this, that, or the other thing related to startups or accounting or marketing or whatever we're talking about with any of my kids, it's not just saying, hey guys, this is what I read out of a book. It's saying, this is what we did. Mm-hmm. And that carries a lot of weight for the kids. They're like, oh, he's not screwing around. Okay, cool, we got it. So that's been helpful for me. It was a challenging process, and I learned a ton, but I wouldn't trade it.
Do you see some of the math strong kids, or maybe some of the folks that are they're more outgoing? Do you see them gravitating towards certain types of business functions? Do the math kids latch on to accounting and engineering, or different types of personalities latching on to more of the sales and the marketing functions?
So I'm going to answer that question in a little bit different process. So that lends itself to how we pair our teams. So each of our teams or our businesses are grouped in teams of 2, 3, or 4 kids. 3 is a really good number for a partnership within the classes. Those kids are paired based on their talents and their skill sets. And I don't want to put 3 of the same types of kids all together because that's not going to work well. So we'll typically, I always try to tell the kids that you're either a hipster, a hackster, or a hustler, right? So if you're one of those 3, let's not have 3 hacksters in the group and no hustlers or hipsters. So you have to have that diversity of thought of where one's going to be able to pick up from the other and learn that. And some teams it doesn't meld well, and others it does, and that's part of the process of just interpersonal relationships and dealing with coworkers, because we don't always get to pick who we work with. But as high school kids, they seem to think that they should. So dealing with that, putting them together, and I'm also very cognizant of who I know is going to work fairly well together and who isn't. Like, oh, these 2 should definitely not work together. That's not going to end well. And we don't ever have to deal with that, but it's still a good lesson. Every year we have to have conversations. I have to have sit-downs with our groups of kids and saying, we need to talk about communication within this group. Like, you guys are not talking, you're not getting along, and it might have just been something that happened at prom or something else. Who knows? But we have to work through that.
Yeah, I would say, as I look back over the last 10 to 15 years at our growth, one of the things that's core is just having a diverse group of skill sets that can work together. That's number one. Finding a diverse group of skill sets is one thing, but then to get a group that can actually they appreciate each other. When I think we've been very mindful of that, especially at the core, is just to get right in the same direction, but also embrace trying to for instance our engineering team, like get the engineering team in front of the customers, get the sales team involved with product, like try and get people, mixing with each other, but also try and head in the same direction. And I would say from a business and a growth standpoint, aside from all the technical stuff, that's probably one of the most important things.
So it's empathy.
Yeah.
Right. So, you get the kids together, and if I can train them how to do a task, training them how to be a good person and be a good human is what we're really doing. That so you don't have to worry about it when they come to you as an employee down the road. So those interpersonal skills of being able to communicate with people, and understand, okay, I'm upset today, you're upset today. Why? Let's talk a little bit about that. Work through that as a human. But it boils down to empathy and just understanding and communication skills. And if we can work through that, the rest all falls into place.
Yeah, for sure. And also, also knowing when maybe it's not going to work. Oh, yeah. There's always those situations where, 2 people, 4 people, 5 people, sometimes, it doesn't mean they're bad people. It just sometimes things don't click.
We've had to fire people. Yep.
that is part of the job, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's clear at some point that we know that that's just not going to work out, and we need to go separate ways.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm really interested in, maybe this is slightly controversial, but I really wanted to ask it, is how do you see programs like this discouraging in a good way and a bad way people going to college, or even beyond college? I would say that a lot of the things you're describing are things that will never be taught in college, and it's great that it's done in high school. Being able to solve problems day one, I think is super important. Like you said, it's the mentality and the approach more so than the specific way of doing something. It's how are you thinking about a problem? Are you comfortable with the problem? Can you work with other people? I think a lot. I was a finance and econ major in college. I'm 36 now, going on 37. I feel like I'm just now ready to understand some of the things that I was taught in college. Corporate finance, econometrics. All these different functions that you get such a high level overview that, maybe it's useful if you're at a 50,000 person company, but if you're at a 50 to 1,000 person company, a lot of times it's not specialized enough to spend all your day, living in one type of a function. So do you think that what you're doing will discourage or encourage kids to, pursue additional education, or how do you think about that?
Good question. As educators, we're probably a little bit, and bias might be a bad word, but we all have college degrees.
Yes.
Right. So we've all gone through that system, and we know the value of that because that's what we need. So when you're surrounded by, when all the professionals in the building that are working with the kids have a college degree of some capacity, master's degree or otherwise, that becomes a mindset.
Yep.
My initial, I failed my first year of college. Got put on academic probation, which was the best thing that ever happened to me because I'm like, all right, kick your butt in gear. Like, clearly I was screwing around, right?
Yeah.
And then I went to the technical college at Appleton Fox Valley Tech, and it was the best experience of my life. And went from being kicked out of college to a 4.0 because somewhere in me the switch flipped, and I was like, yep, let's get the act together and go.
Yeah.
I very much appreciate the technical college system. I think it's fantastic.
I completely agree.
I think it's completely undersold. And I always encourage my kids to at least go that route because I've seen so many of my kids that go to a 4-year college only to come back after a year. Many of my kids, don't get me wrong, many of my kids go off and finish a 4-year degree and master's degree, and they do amazing things. But with the cost of education and everything else, like, start local on that. There's nothing wrong with it. I thought it was fantastic, and it really helped me embrace my hands-on learning sort of process. I'm less concerned about where kids are going to be going to school. I just want to make sure that they are set up for success.
Yep.
And in the end, we all have to be lifelong learners, right? The more you know, the more that you know that you need to know more. That was probably too wordy. But just that lifelong learning mentality is more important to me.
Yeah, and I think that the way that I think about it is college or a master's degree or a doctorate or just on-the-job training, YouTube, forums. These are all just learning tools in the toolkit. And my generation was pressured very hard to go to a four-year college. Yeah. And we've talked a lot about this on the podcast and how I don't think people were really given consideration that there are other options. Is you go to a 4-year college or you don't. And I don't know if that served everybody well. It served a lot of people well, but I look at programs like this plus all the learning that you can do on your own. I know we're kind of collaborated on a 3D printing project recently, and I think that's a really good parallel comparisons. A few years ago, 11 3D printers would have been several $100,000, and we were able to invest about $10,000 in those 3D printers. So the means of production and the tools and the empowering kids, these things, the costs are really, really they're plummeting, which is great. And I think it'll be interesting to see with that, plus online education, plus other tools that schools are implementing, how that ends up shifting people in one direction or another.
So 2 things on that: the one, having partnerships like our program with Will Lighting is fantastic because yesterday my students were in here working with your team and 3D printing their prototype for their product, which is awesome. And we're going to expand that going more so in the future. None of those kids knew you existed up until yesterday. And now some of them may think like, oh, wow, that's really cool. That's an opportunity that they never knew about or had a possibility about. The second part of that equation is, one of the classes that I teach is a 6th grade technology literacy class. And in that class, we have, they do coding and programming. So they'll create their own custom video game. And the primary tenet in that class,
wow, that's cool.
One of the rules that I have in that class as they're doing that project is ask 3 before me. And I got written up on the wall. So before they ask me a question, they have to ask their neighbor, Google, or YouTube. And if they've asked those 3 entities,
so 2 pretty powerful sources.
Yeah, then they can, and they're still stumped. Then talk to me. And it's again, I'm teaching them young to reduce their dependency on instant sort of feedback and like, give me the answer now. Like, no, do the research.
Yep.
Like, somebody in this room is smarter than you. So I remember the first year I started doing that, one of my kids who's now a senior, within the second day he came back and said, Mr. Wismer, I figured out how to do this level 3 thing, and I got a boss battle going on there, and this guy comes in and like, it was awesome. Like, how did you do that? That's awesome. I love that sort of that thought process, and now he's probably going to be an engineer or something and make more money right off the bat than I will ever see. But that mindset is great that they embrace that. And I'll drop that same sort of a process with my incubator kids. Like, sounds like a problem you should research, and I'll walk away.
Yeah.
Like, figure it out.
I remember that was such an important moment for me when we built our first website and we hired a few developers. Some worked out, some didn't. Mm-hmm. But the amount of information, this is back in like 2007, 2008, they're all self-taught. Mm-hmm. Like it was, go to a code library, copy and paste the code, start with that code, clean some of it up, maybe don't clean some of it up. But just the confidence that even if you didn't know how to write that particular line of code or know that language, it was just assumed that you were going to be able to figure it out.
Yeah.
Which sounds like that's what you're trying to instill.
Well, and my kids call me out on this on the carpet all the time. They're like, Mr. Wismer, how do you know how to do all this software? I was teaching my kids how to do some database management today. And I'm like, I don't know. Did you get taught how to do this in high school? Like, no, this wasn't a thing when I was in high school. And in the 90s, we had like DOS.
Yeah.
And how'd you learn how to do it? I'm like, I don't know. I just started pressing buttons and seeing what they do. That didn't work. Okay, undo button, figure it out, and tried another way, and eventually you figure it out. And that mindset's really important.
For sure.
That's how I learned how to do 2/3 of my job here.
You know what? That's
Press
at least
and see what they do.
Yeah.
At least
every time since I started. I mean, the podcast thing. I walked in and I'm like, "There's no way I'm going to figure this out." But I couldn't say no. I mean, you just hired me, so started pressing buttons, and here we are.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of our culture, where at least 80% of us. Even if you don't know how to do something, you're confident you can learn it. If it's mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, production, like last year we implemented, a lot of lean process flow initiatives on the production floor. It was a case of we didn't have a lean process flow Six Sigma consultant expert come in. It was, okay, we better spend a few weeks learning how to solve this problem. Mm-hmm. And it was just, again, that kind of culture and mentality, it's such a great cultural momentum, component to have, because, once you see it a few times, and once you see, you go through a couple cycles of that, you definitely feel empowered.
Well, that resilience is really important. I mean,
the grit, right?
Well, yeah. What's the alternative? You give up?
Yeah.
That's not an option.
It's not. I'm still here.
Right. Yeah.
Still producing a podcast.
It's funny because when I got hired at North Fond du Lac 8 years ago, Aaron Sadoff dropped. He's like, "Oh, yeah, by the way, you're running a video production lab too." I'm like, "Cool, never taught it. Let's figure it out." So, you surround yourself with really intelligent people, and you just ask questions.
It's fun too, right?
Yeah. Having so many folks part of our program, we've got 80 or 100 different classroom coaches and mentors and professionals that come into our classroom, is equally empowering for these kids to be able to have conversations with these mentors, folks that come in. We had in the last week, we probably had 15 or 20 different people in our classroom in the last week or two. And these are all different folks that kids are going to connect with, and they don't know it yet, but their last project is to build out their LinkedIn page. And it's like, okay, cool. Now here's your list of people you need to connect with. Remember all these people? Oh, yeah, these are really good people. Well, now they're in your Rolodex, which they don't know what that means. But.
And there's such a great small business culture in Fond du Lac.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it does, machine shops, contractors, a lot of it's manufacturing and construction related. But, it's just, there's a lot of 2 to 20 person, companies that have made it through many, many recessions. They have that grit, they have that problem solving mentality, and it's definitely ingrained in this area.
The first group of people that I called in 2017 when we started this class, is I sat down with Envision and I said, who do I need to talk to? And they laid out this list of awesome people, and many of them are still involved or and contributed in some capacity. So yeah, you're absolutely right. The group of people in Fond du Lac just pull me away.
That's awesome. So if people want to get more involved, want to learn more about what you're doing in North Fond du Lac, where are the best resources for that?
So they can go to INCubatoredu nfdl.com. That's our website, or you can search us out on our district homepage as well through School District North Fond du Lac. Seek me out in any capacity. I'm happy to do that and have a conversation with you. And I think probably the most powerful process of that is just come on in.
Yeah.
Come to the classroom. And I don't think that, it's important for us, for education as a whole. First off, educators do a horrible job promoting themselves and promoting our what we do as educators. Like, we don't toot our own horn enough. You know, we always hear about what's bad in the news about education and that sort of thing, especially with politics. And, you know, most of it is not true. Just get in the classroom and find out. So I think it's really, really valuable, aside of all the stuff that we're teaching, just to get all these community members in the classroom just to see what's going on. And they're going to very quickly find out that there's a lot of really cool things happening. And I've heard that over and over again of people that get involved in the program, like, you guys are doing all this stuff? This isn't like, oh my God, I didn't get to do this when I was a kid. I'm like, yeah, well, of course. Yeah, we're doing really cool stuff. We're not just still using abacuses and stuff.
No, there's so much cool stuff going, and you guys are a big part of that in the area. And I think the more networking and you know, like-minded people with diverse skill sets, of course, that we can kind of get moving in the same direction. You know, it starts at the micro level, but I think, you know, before too long, it can start to affect things in a positive way, in a big way.
Sure.
So thanks for all you do, man. And thanks for coming on. Yeah, absolutely.